This is the Washington Bay. And George Washington stands here on this side under a window called Birth of a New Nation, which is kind of appropriate for the first president of our country. And over there is the Lincoln Bay, and that window is the agony of the Civil War. It represents the campfires that the soldiers were around. It's got the colors of their uniforms in it, and it is also the colors of war, the reds and the yellows. So our windows tell American stories, but mostly they tell biblical stories. And the reason why was back in medieval times, back in 1170s to 1700, most people, practically all of the people, could not read, nor could they write, nor could they do arithmetic. And so you had to have something that reminded people of the beauty of God's Word. And so they created these beautiful windows in here. We have very thin walls in here because the pillars with those pointed arches are holding up everything. You are trusting physics and engineering when you're standing in here because it's all about gravity and compression. So we had an earthquake here and we had some damage, but not a lot. And I'll talk to you about that as we go along. Have you ever been through an earthquake?
Yes.
No.
I did not know what to do. And all my books on my bookshelf fell on my head. And I said, maybe I'll be safer outside. Apparently that's the wrong thing to do. But nobody was hurt in the cathedral. It did have to close for a year and a half. But I'm going to teach you what people saw who couldn't read when they came in churches like this. Because the idea was to make you think of heaven and to make you think of the goodness of God. So if you turn around, we're going to look at that window up there. It's in what's known as the clear story, or the Clara story. And it is 30 feet high. It's a big window. We're standing 103 feet below it. And so we are looking at a big window. The window on the left side has 4 lancets. That first lancet has the signs of strife in it. It has the skulls at the bottom. Can you see them? Can you see the skulls? You see the guys poking each other's eyes out with their spears. It's a lovely picture. And then you see a great wash of water in the second thing comes through and try and wash away all of that strife. The next window has a rainbow and a guy standing in a wooden boat with some funny-looking animals sticking its heads out. Noah's Ark?
Noah.
Very good. Now that's what people would remember. They would have looked at that and they would have remembered the thing we were told about Noah's Ark. It's kind of a cool way to learn. It's kind of more like comic books. But cathedrals like this were called stone Bibles and glass Bibles. But up there, you also see in the 4th lancet, you see the reestablishment of growing grapes. Grapes make great grape jelly, but they also make great wine. And if you'd been on a boat for 6 months while the water came down, because it didn't stop overnight, and you were on a boat with your in-laws and your smelly animals for 6 months, you'd need a glass of wine also, is what your father said. But it is actually in the Bible, but that's what he did. Now there are 18 big windows like that. Most of them are biblical, Old Testament types of stories. They represent the promises that God made to the Hebrew people. As we move further into the cathedral, we get more into Christianity and the changeover. Because churches like this were built from east to west. You built your altar first. But here, in this particular cathedral, we built it slightly differently because we started with creation. But this part was not built until 1976. We started building this cathedral in 1907. We built a church chapel down below us. It's called Bethlehem Chapel, and for 25, 30 years, it was our cathedral. As we built the rest of this, we had to raise money from different parts of the cathedral. We did not want to borrow the money. We wanted to pay as you go. And so it took us a long time to get this done, 83 years. 1990, the last stone was placed. Did you guys know that it took 83 years? Some churches in Europe took as much as 800 years to build. So anyway, pardon me?
Yeah, kind of lucky.
Yeah, we're lucky, 83 years. So we're going to go and we're going to take a look at a couple of different types of windows, and we're going to talk about what the cathedral does. This is a good answer. What else? Outer space? Yes? Absolutely, that's a good one.
I was thinking of like, since galaxy goes on forever.
The galaxy goes on forever. Boy, you guys are smart. Yes, sir.
Maybe which one do you think is
Capricorn. Yes, sir. A lot of people say that, by the way. A lot of people say that. Did you want to say something?
It looks like.
Okay, that's actually the Big Bang. Because that's the moment when God said, let there be light, and you see the light exploding out into the colors. But good guess. So, what it is it's commonly called the space window. You guys guessed a lot of that. It also, I'm just going to get by you.
Sorry.
No problem. And it was given to us by the director of NASA. And he was the man, Tom Paine was the guy, who was responsible for getting us to the moon. He was the project manager of getting us to the moon. And he wanted that window to honor the people who got us to the moon. People like the engineers, the mathematicians, the taxpayers, the cleaners, all the people who you forget you need to have to get a big project done. The astronauts from Apollo 11 came here in 1974, and they dedicated this window for us. That when these arms encompass all the congregation in love and in God's blessings. But you're standing right here in the crossing, and could you pop up there? You are seeing where we actually have our services. This is also when we have funerals in the National Cathedral. When we have a presidential funeral, the casket would be right here, and the president would be sitting, the current president, not the dead president, the current president would be sitting over there. We have about 3,500 seats in here. If we add in the balconies in the front too, it's about 3,500, 4,000 people. The only time I remember there being more than 4,000 people in this cathedral was when the Dalai Lama preached from our pulpit. And the pulpit was actually made in England. And it represents, do you guys know what the Magna Carta is? Okay. It represents the translation of the Bible into English, which was a big deal back in the 1500s and the 1200s. So this pulpit is also well known because it was where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his last Sunday sermon before he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. He had a 57-minute sermon. I was not here for that, but the 57-minute sermon was about staying awake during turbulent times. So it was an interesting type of thing. Anyway, so we're standing here and we're seeing two more of the rose windows. And that was the original rose window. It's about 27 feet across. The figure of Christ in the middle is 6 feet tall. And who's 6 feet tall here?
My dad.
Okay. So if you were standing up there, you would be completely encompassed.
Be about 3 inches taller.
You're about 3 inches taller. You still would be encompassed by that. But in this, you see at the very top, you see the gates of heaven in that gold. Well, what was interesting was back in 1939, when that window was put in, people had forgotten how to make certain colors like they had done in medieval times. And so they had to rediscover it. And the man who did that window was a glass chemist. And he analyzed pieces of glass from Europe, and he found out that that gold is made with uranium. there might be a reason why the recipe was lost, but it does glow, doesn't it? It's very nice, and uranium should glow. At the bottom, you see the red, and those are the fiery gates of hell. And that's made with molten glass, 2,300 degrees, which is pretty hot. And the best thing is not to sit. Anyway, they pour molten gold into the molten glass, and they didn't know that door was open. Anyway, so they pour it in there. So it takes molten gold and molten glass. Stand up, guys. And they make that beautiful red. We have found other ways to make red that is not quite as expensive as molten gold. But it was in 1939 that a guy by the name of Rowan Lecomte, who did that big glass window in the back and all the windows up here and 35 other ones in this cathedral, came in when he was 14 years old. 14 years old, he saw that window and he says, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And he came back at 17, he presented a sample window to the architect. The architect hired him. He stayed here until he was 86 years old. He did a lot of windows here. Takes about 2 years per window. The big round one took about 4 years. But he was he certainly knew what he wanted to do. This is holding up. These big towers are much. These big pillars are much larger than the other pillars we walked by. They're about 17 feet around, about 21 third graders. And if you take a look, it's very large. It's holding up a 300-foot tower that has 63 bells. 53 of them are played on a keyboard, carillon bell, and they are actually a string that makes the hammer hit the bell. And then there are 10 pull bells. You can actually go over the top of the bells on certain tours. It is 660 steps up, and they're about this high. They are the hardest steps I've ever climbed in my life. But it is fun. You get to walk under the windows, and you get to walk in the gutters. Just exactly what you always want to do. Last time I went, it was pouring rain, and I was not wearing jeans. I was wearing a skirt. And it was a little soaking wet all the way around. But come back and have fun with us. Anyway, that's a very good observation. Very good observation. So the mirrors that you're looking at, they're and they contribute to the American character and the American way of life. The names were selected by the Smithsonian in 1967 when we were decorating this particular chapel. And you will see that there is one woman for every 20 men. Because at the time, it wasn't popular to put in women. So the newest cushion in there is going to be Ronald Reagan's. We have finished with George Herbert Walker Bush's, but it has not been blessed yet. Now I know, yes, sir.
Are those cracks on the ground because of the earthquake?
No, that's actually because the foundation settled. This part of the foundation was done in 1929, and below us is the Bethlehem Chapel. That's scary. The original chapel, and so the footings are a little bit different. As a matter of fact, we had very little damage in the interior, but we still had to touch every single brick. We had to use drones to go into some of the higher areas to take a look at everything. You do know that the Washington Monument was also affected during that earthquake, and it was closed for about 5 years. We were closed for about 18 months. One of the things that we found when we were looking was a box of ashes. It turned out to be the wife of one of the Masons, who they had refused to let be buried next to him when he passed. So his brother Masons tucked her into the attic, and when we found them, we were glad to repatriate the woman with her husband after 40 years. Yes, sir.
Is that the French flag?
You are absolutely correct. And the reason why that French flag is there is that man Norman Prince happens to be the person who went during World War I to France to teach people how to fight with airplanes. It was a brand new construct. And actually, he trained the battalions that fought the Red Barracks, if you know anything about World War I. Yes, sir?
I do.
You do. Good for you. So Norman Prince is standing on what is supposed to be an eagle. But the kids from Miami came and told me that that's a sea turtle. And now I cannot see the eagle anymore. That reredos back there proves that the walls are not necessarily low there. It is the limestone is actually carved directly into the wall. It is in there pieces that are carved into the wall. So there's nothing behind it. Makes it very easy to clean. You just use the hose and wash it down. No, they would not let me do that. Come on into the high altar. I will talk about that. Thank you for pointing them out. So, come on in, guys. And you're in the choir, the organ area, and the high altar. That high altar back there is stone. It is carved from the stone from Normandy, France. The rest of the stone in this cathedral is pretty much all Indiana limestone from Bedford, Indiana. We always joke that there's a very large hole in Bedford, Indiana, shaped like this cathedral. We have been pulling stone from Bedford, Indiana for over 100 years. We needed a place that was going to be able to support us for a while. Yes, ma'am. Which, that?
The chair? The seat. Yes.
Boy, she's just, you guys are all stealing my thunder. That, my dear, is called a cathedral. And a cathedral is the place of the cathedra. And the cathedra happens to be the bishop's throne or the bishop's chair. It is also, single-handedly, the most uncomfortable chair in this entire place. Yes, sir. I'm going to talk about that, so let me see if I can answer your question and tell me if I have. The reredos back there, the altar screen, came from stone from Caen, France. And it is carved with over 110 figures, representing people who have contributed to Christianity over the 20 centuries that Christianity has had so far. It is interesting because the figures around the altar part, those 6 figures, are the Beatitudes of Matthew. I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink, etc. But those statues are almost as tall as me.
What?
The centerpiece is 16 feet. That's Christ in majesty. It's all about perspective. Because if you are looking at this high altar from back where we started, you can see it very clearly. And part of the reason why is we bend the axis of the cathedral. We actually make it crooked 6 degrees so that we don't have a vanishing point. A vanishing point is what you see when you look down a parallel railroad track as it goes goes down into the horizon, and it disappears. Your eyes automatically force that vanishing point. And that vanishing point we don't want to have happen. We want people in the back of the church to be able to see this. Not only is it big, it's also out of true. We do not stand perfectly in line with the back. It's 6 degrees off. It's been known for 700 years that you need to do that, and we're just copying things. Yes, sir?
Okay, so where the cross is, what is supposed to be in between the cross?
So that would be flowers, but today is Wednesday, and on Wednesday we remove last Sunday's flowers, and tomorrow they will start putting up the new flowers for the next time. Normally the flower arrangements are around 5.5 feet tall. That cross that's there is 6.5 feet. Yes, sir?
Are those like doors on the side?
They are. They go to the apse, and the apse is where we store certain things that are necessary for communion. So, perspective is what we use in these things. There are certain guidelines that churches use to get the size that they need. but it's, yes ma'am? No. It's probably stone, but not necessarily, well, it might be semi-precious things like opal or something like that. That is normally completely covered by flowers anyway. So we talked about that this is a cathedral. That's why this is called a cathedral. We also are looking at our organ. And when you asked about what were those pipes up there, they are part of the organ. They're horns, and they're connected to the organ. The console is halfway in the middle. You see some of the pipes that are up there? There are actually 10,600 pipes to that organ. They are laid in what's known as the triforum, all the way around the altar and all the way out into the transept. They lie down, they stand up, but there are 10,600 of them. 40% of them are no longer working. We put this organ in 1937, and things have happened. Not that we don't keep it maintenance up, but that's also where our air conditioning and our electricity is. And so people have to walk up there with big clumpy boots and repair those things. And occasionally a pipe gets kicked off. Well, after 115 years, 85 years since the organ was put in, we've lost quite a few of them. So we are starting a renovation project. Now, I'm not going to ask you for a donation. You know, everything in this place is done by donation. I'm not going to ask you for a donation for the organ refurbishing, because we have an organ donor. So that family is going to give us around $14 million to move, repair, refurbish, rebuild, and transfer a lot of the pipes out into the nave. The nave wasn't built till 1951, and so we had to leave the configuration. Hopefully we will also renovate our air conditioning and our electricity and our other utilities. Yes, sir.
That symbol right there on the front, like you have it on your necklace too.
That's known as a Jerusalem cross, and that is the symbol of this particular cathedral, the Jerusalem cross. When I went to Israel and Jerusalem, my husband bought me this. He bought it for himself, but you might notice who's wearing it. Anyway, by the way, any place that has a cathedral